Evictions are soaring and Americans can't pay the rent, potentially throwing hundreds of thousands of families out of their homes at a time when homeless shelters are jammed to the rafters with 10 million illegal immigrants. A useful reminder that the problem with our ruling elite is not just Joe Biden's dementia. They have made a very big bed we're all going to be lying in. The numbers come from the Wall Street Journal, reports that since the pandemic, evictions are up 15% in 10 of the 33 cities they survey. In a half dozen major cities, including Houston, Phoenix, and Las Vegas, evictions are up 35% since pre-pandemic. Last month, Phoenix landlords filed more eviction notices than the peak of the 2008 crisis. Note, the jump is not nationwide for the simple reason that most blue cities make it nearly impossible to evict a renter who won't pay, meaning the landlord is eating the rent, presumably making plans to sell out since no good deed goes unpunished in the progressive utopia. This all means unpaid rent is rising much faster than evictions. The eviction bans are hiding it. To give a sense, the Seattle Housing Authority reports low-income tenants with overdue rent is up 322% since pre-pandemic. Seattle's Low-Income Housing Institute estimates it's up 559%. What's driving it, of course, is the doubling of housing costs from the money-printing orgy that took the number of dollars in existence from $15 trillion in 2019 to nearly $21 trillion today. A 40% increase, that means $1 in $3 has fresh ink on it. Toss in the Fed's rate hikes that took mortgages from 3% to 7.5%, along with property tax and home insurance that's soaring above inflation, and you've got the perfect storm that is knocking people out of the game and onto the street. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. Housing is not getting any cheaper, but the economy is getting worse, meaning jobs, incomes, and ability to pay the rent. In a recent video, I mentioned major banks are now projecting both ongoing inflation and higher interest rates, which will continue to pump up housing costs that will pass on to rents. So it's going to get worse for renters, of whom nearly half are already, quote, cost burdened, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities. 1 in 3 renters spend over half their income on rent. If the income falters, the rent won't get paid. Now, you might think that with an election looming, Washington would be trying to pitch in and fix it, perhaps cut back on the artillery for Ukraine, or the million-man migrant shelters to bring down inflation and rates, or perhaps even making it easy for landlords to protect themselves so more people are willing to convert their basement apartments. Of course, Washington is doing no such thing. Instead, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, just announced a $40 million program to hire lawyers to force landlords to eat the rent even when the renter has no intention of ever paying, which hides the problem, it's true, at the expense of bankrupting tens of thousands of landlords and sending a clear message to any future landlord to never ever rent to anybody who stands the remotest chance of not paying the rent. That slams the door on blue collars, recent grads, and young families hoping to find a place to live that isn't mom's basement. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.